Let me first of all say thank you to you. There's been no more consistent, clear and passionate voice for animals in this House of Commons over the course, and I don't want to embarrass you by running through quite how long you've been here, but over the course of the last couple of decades, there's been no more passionate and effective voice than your own. And I do think that the arguments that you have been making are now reaching a level, a critical mass, where they command support across the political spectrum. And if we are thinking of a pioneer that has used the House of Commons and the platform of Parliament to speak up for those who have no voice, for animals, then you have done so. And we owe you a huge debt of gratitude. Thank you. Yeah. And I'm grateful to both the Foundation and also the Conservative Environment Network for organising and sponsoring this event. Because Roger is right. We're at a critical moment, a hinge point. The question of how we improve both our environment and animal welfare as we leave the European Union is central to the mission that we have in DEFRA. And of course there are people in this room who are passionately attached to our membership of the European Union and others who were keen that we leave. But now, all of us I know in this room and across the Conservative Party, including the Prime Minister, are determined to ensure that one of the unambiguous positives that comes as a result of our leaving the European Union is an enhanced environment and stronger animal welfare standards. And we start from a strong position. It is the case that, looking back to the leadership shown by John Gummer, Lord Deben, when he was Environment Secretary, we went out there ahead of our European neighbours in order to ensure that animal welfare standards, both for farm animals and for wild animals, were higher and stronger, and quite rightly so, than other countries. And indeed, as Roger has mentioned, it is the case that there are practices which are accepted, indeed celebrated, in some other European countries that the British public quite rightly would not stand for here. And we now have an opportunity to go further. And we've shown, I hope, the determination that we have to pursue this particular direction in some of the steps that we've been able to take since the general election. So I was proud to be able to consult, and I'm going to, I hope in the new year, be able to legislate to prevent the use of the plastic microbeads that contribute so much to the despoliation of our marine environment and to harming marine wildlife. I'm delighted that we're consulting now on a total ban on the sale of ivory, because no one should consider that ivory should be something to celebrate, it should not be a good of ostentation. The whole point is that ivory is a direct byproduct of savagery and cruelty, and if we can show world leadership by banning it here, we can ensure that an iconic species, the African elephant, can be there for future generations to celebrate and enjoy. And it's also the case that we recognise that when it comes to not just how animals are treated in their life, but also how they're treated at the point of death, that it is important that we maintain high standards, which is why we're going to introduce CCTV into abattoirs in order to ensure that the high standards, which I know that we all believe in, are absolutely maintained and policed effectively. And it is also the case already that we've signalled that we're going to increase the criminal sentence for the most sadistic and wicked acts of cruelty, so that we will have the strongest penalties for animal cruelty anywhere in the civilized world. But all of this is just work in progress towards a greater goal, and that is to make sure that Britain, a nation of animal lovers, is the nation which has the world's best animal welfare standards in every area. Which is why, following on from Roger's lead, we will be reviewing the live export of animals for slaughter to see what we can do in order to restrict and, if possible, remove this trade which generates so much pain and misery still. It's why we're also keen to look at the sale of pets, companion animals, puppies, in order to ensure that the trade in animals which uses third parties and the internet in order to mask the sometimes horrific circumstances in which some animals are born and raised in their first few weeks, we want to end that trade, and we're looking at how we might be able to do so with the opportunities that arise both in domestic legislation and as we leave the EU. And it's also the case that as we shape a new agricultural policy, as we derive new instruments which we can use to support farmers in the work that they do and to ensure that we have high quality food in the future, We want to ensure that animal welfare standards are there at the heart of everything that we do, and that we reward those farmers who strive for even higher standards, even as we insist on making sure that that tiny minority, that may occasionally fall foul of those standards, is prosecuted more effectively than ever before. And the final thing that I want to say is that these are all things that we can do in Britain. But as I alluded to when I talked about ivory, we have international obligations as well. And the WWF is a British charity founded by Britons and supported by the Duke of Edinburgh. Its work, and the work of so many other organisations that operate internationally, remind us that we have an obligation not just to animals in this country who are protected by the laws that we enact, but to animals worldwide, because it is one planet and one commitment on our part to the animals of that planet needs to be honoured in everything that we do. And that is why, as Roger alluded to, when there was a recent kerfuffle in the House of Commons over the whole principle of animal sentience, I was really anxious to ensure that we understood, and that the country understood, that we are absolutely committed not just to recognising that animals are sentient beings, but to making sure that they are protected in every way possible. And we'll be saying more, legislating more, and doing more critically in order to ensure that when future generations look back, they can look at this generation and recognise that it was the people in this room, people led by Sir Roger, people like my colleague Teresa and David, and Henry Smith, and Rebecca Powell, and Richard Benyon, and others, who were responsible for making sure, and Lorraine and Chris, thank you for your sponsorship as well, making sure that we could look back and say, at last, animals were treated with the dignity and the protection that they absolutely deserve. Thank you all very much.